Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the TOT Doctors Roundtable. If you haven't already, please subscribe by hitting that red button and the notification bell so you won't miss anything. So today we have on our panel Dr. Nichols. How are you, Keith?
All right, how you going? How's it going, guys and ladies?
Hi, and Dr. Scott Howell. Welcome, Scott. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Normally, we would have had Eric Serrano on as well, but he's running late. Maybe he'll still calling during this live stream. We will see. So anyway, we can start.
Normally, we would have had Eric Serrano on as well. I'm going to put this, there we go. All right.
Okay. So I wanted to repeat that these guys, together with many others, are in our closed and free Facebook group, TRT and Hormone Optimization Therapy, HOT. If you're watching this, you surely must be interested. And if you haven't already, please join that group. The link you will find under this video. So first, we have a couple of prepared questions for our panel. And afterwards, we will take your questions from the Q&A live stream chat box. In that chat box, your questions will be monitored and filtered by our moderators, or maybe for the moment, just moderator Wakit Janja, who is also moderator in our Facebook group. So if you want to start your questions in the chat box, one more thing that is now possible. If you value the content that is brought here on the channel, and if you want your questions to stand out for me and the moderators, consider using the super chat option. That's the little $sign in the type box. You can donate $1 or $2 as a tip, so your question will appear on top of the chat box for a while. So that's a new option from YouTube. And one more thing, we got a lot of questions prepared from our viewers on female hormone optimization. So those will be addressed by our female expert, endorsed by dr.Neal Rouzier, in our separate series called Hormone Replacement Therapy for Women. The first episode, in which Dr. Rouzier introduced Angie Nichols, was uploaded only yesterday. So have a look at that if you haven't already. So for this roundtable, we'll stick to men's issues. And let's start now, Keith and Scott. So the first question we had prepared and received from our viewers and subscribers was, are there any cardioprotective benefits of T3? Do you have any studies that can be referenced for more detail? Scott, you're the man with the literature, I guess.
Well, you know, I didn't pull any studies for this because the cardioprotective benefits are fairly indirect. There is a benefit to treating hypothyroidism. So if your thyroid is underproducing, then you can be at greater risk of cardioprotective or greater risk of cardiovascular disease. And then likely on the other end of the spectrum with hyperthyroidism. What do you think, Keith?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of studies, and I think that what needs to be addressed is that it's the fact that women and men with low or normal, what we consider euthyroid, with normal TSH levels, T3 levels, T4 levels, when they're low, or when we have the sick euthyroid syndrome, some would call, what happens is that there's an association with coronary heart disease and fatal coronary heart disease with levels within the normal range. So point is that those with what we would consider subclinical hypothyroidism are still at a very increased risk of cardiovascular disease. And so we treat them with T3 to prevent that, a combination of T4, T3 that is. So yeah, I've got plenty of studies to show the association between normal or subclinical hypothyroidism and the increased incidence of cardiovascular disease. So I've got plenty of those studies for you. I mean, women with subclinical hypothyroidism, meaning T4 levels in the normal range, but elevated TSH, were almost twice as likely as women without the condition to have blockages of the aorta. They were twice as likely to have heart attacks. So bottom line, subclinical hypothyroidism isn't really recognized by the Endocrine Society or the AEC, but that's what we treat on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Outstanding.
Okay, very interesting, yeah. So, and someone said, I've been told that thyroid is needed to metabolize testosterone at the cellular level. Is this why testosterone does not work when the thyroid is not healthy. Do you understand that question, Scott?
Let's see how to begin with this. There is crosstalk among sex hormones and thyroid and releasing hormones of the thyroid. Both hypo and hyperthyroidism can indirectly affect the gonadal axis function in men. So the evidence is taken from studies that show a biochemical relationship different relationships throughout the literature. So one of these is there is an increased gonadotropin response to gonadotropin releasing hormone in men with untreated hyperthyroidism compared to when treatment renders a euthyroid state, and suggesting a possible role of thyroid hormone in sensitization of the gonadotropes. The second is hyperthyroidism has been associated with low testosterone levels, assumed to be due to low steroid hormone binding globulin levels. But on the other hand, low free testosterone levels that normalize when the hypothyroidism is treated have also been demonstrated. So there's several mechanisms at play here. Moving further, a hypothyroid state has been shown to increase concentrations of steroid hormone binding globulin and total testosterone with free testosterone levels that are generally normal. There's also some evidence to suggest that aromatase activity increases in hyperthyroidism, and this has been implicated in affecting sexual function. FSH and LH levels in men with thyroid dysfunction tend to be in the normal range, though more severe hypothyroidism patients may exhibit elevations in the gonadotropins, the releasing hormones. So the last point was hypothyroidism, whether it's primary or central, has been associated with erectile dysfunction and hypoactive sexual disorder with sort of an unclear prevalence. T4 and T3 replacement can improve symptoms and testosterone levels without testosterone replacement therapy. So that's sort of where I was going with that. I'm trying to think of anything else I might add to this.
I'm glad you actually went there with that because I think it really addresses a question that actually gets asked a lot on the forum pages between physicians, like at WorldLink. Of course, when men come in with hormone-related deficiencies, erectile dysfunction is one of the tops on the list. But they also come in with, significantly low testosterone. Some they actually meet criteria for hypogonadism, but most are in the low normal range. They're free certainly as is low or low normal. And I think what we run into, and I think that sometimes it just requires patience on the physician and the patient, is that when we initiate treatment with testosterone, we certainly need to get it into an optimal range, and we are treating symptoms. And especially with men, it's not necessarily with women, but let's just talk about men for the moment. How would you really know if it's thyroid or testosterone, majorly affecting your erectile dysfunction? First and foremost, I personally like to get testosterone in an optimal range and see if that improves. In the majority of men, that does. But you do have to still get it in an optimal range and give it enough time to work. It doesn't work in 2 weeks or 4 weeks. We have to give it a trial. You have to get it to a certain level and it has to be there for a while to know if we're going to get an effect. If we continue with erectile dysfunction and maybe even fatigue and other symptoms, then I initiate thyroid in a male, especially, and try to optimize those levels, especially for the erectile dysfunction. The hard part is getting the men to be a little patient when you're initiating testosterone replacement therapy and giving the testosterone time enough to work, because every man I called this past week was perfect. And they're not on thyroid, maybe one, but they're on just testosterone. Now, some are ultimately going to need thyroid, but I really like to optimize thyroid testosterone in a man and then address the thyroid if we don't get significant symptomatic improvement in certain areas, especially fatigue, and we still remain with some erectile dysfunction. The problem that I run into is, we want it now, we want it within weeks, we want it in 1 month or 2 months, and it doesn't always work that way. So I guess this whole lecture I just gave was based on you got to get levels high enough, you got to give it time to work. And if it doesn't, then let's go to the next step. But what Scott brought up is, yes, thyroid can play a role in erectile dysfunction in men. And I see a lot of message boards between physicians where testosterone's in a beautiful range, everything's addressed, and the thyroid is also in normal range, but they're still having some significant erectile dysfunction. We're talking about in younger men. We're not even talking older men. We're talking to mid-30, early 40-year-old men. But even though those thyroids in the normal range, I would still then start with a trial of thyroid supplementation to get the free T3 in an optimal range and see if that will certainly improve those continued symptoms, especially of fatigue, weight gain, and erectile dysfunction.
Mm-hmm. And the next question was a bit of the same kind. It was, why does the thyroid symptoms override TRT for some men? He said, I really hear of men who start thyroid and say it didn't work until they added TRT. It's always thyroid first and TRT second. Is that what you see? No.
No, for me, it's testosterone first for men. That's while they're there, and then thyroid second. Now, women, look, they're much more complicated than this. You're going to find that out as the more and more you give women's podcasts. But they're very, very sensitive to thyroid, much more so than men, and much more needy of it, I would say. We do, but I'll go with the testosterone trial first. And a lot of men don't need any addition of thyroid. Some do, but not all do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Well, you could also assume that there were deficiencies in both, but unless it's really needed, there's no reason for it. And, these differences that Keith just talked about are just a great explanation of why optimization is so important. Because if, you think of all the symptoms with one disorder and then think of what the symptoms are for a general hormonal imbalance where more than one portion of the endocrine system is off. And then you think about how hard it is to narrow something like that down. And so that's one of the reasons why I started to really move with Keith about, going into optimization and learning more about this process, just because it makes sense in so many situations.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and I think to your listeners, to some degree, around the country, what gets more physicians in trouble with their colleagues, their peers, the medical boards, believe it or not, it's not testosterone, it's thyroid. It's thyroid. It's the prescription of thyroid, because the internist, the endocrinologist, the family medicine physician, they still think that by giving thyroid and raising your thyroid levels and suppressing your TSH is going to result in the same sequelae that you get with Graves' disease or hyperthyroidism, such as osteoporosis and increased risk of, cardiac death, cardiac abnormalities, AFib, but you don't. But they don't understand the difference between endogenous hyperthyroidism and obtaining thyroid exogenously. So they don't result in the same problems, because Graves' disease or true hyperthyroidism, it has an autoimmune component. It's an autoimmune disease. So that's the problem that we run into. So you do need to be a little careful. Practitioners are getting a little more careful. You're seeing them actually getting a little more careful with even the prescriptions for testosterone, only getting it to a certain level. If that doesn't work, adding HCG or other things, adding an AI, anything they can affect, anything they can do to lower sex hormone binding globulin, all these things that just make men feel worse, actually, not better. But you are seeing a very restrictive nature for testosterone, we know, but also thyroid. It's the pharmacists that are reporting physicians as well, reporting physicians for prescribing thyroid for patients that don't meet criteria for hypothyroidism.
Yeah. Okay. Very strange, that thyroid gets those physicians in trouble.
If you want to piss off an internist or a family physician, let them see you put their patient on thyroid, let them come in with what we consider a suppressed TSH, they go absolutely bonkers. They get literally pissed. They threaten to fire the patient if they don't stop. I mean, we used to hand off packets of information for our patients to take to their family physician. We actually would give them packets, especially thyroid, women that needed that thyroid so bad. They come in, they felt terrible. They went to their family doctor for years. We'd give them a packet of information showing the safety and why it would be needed for subclinical hypothyroidism. The patient's feeling great. And literally, this is not figurative, it is literally in front of the patient. They would take that packet, they would open it up, and they would throw it in the trash can right in front of the patient. They literally would throw it in the trash can right in front of the patient.
Wow. That's a good physician-patient relationship.
Well, it's just that they're very sensitive to anybody messing with their patient's thyroid. But yet they haven't made their patient well. Their patient's still, weak, cold, tired, fatigue, gaining weight, but as soon as you make them all better, they ignore the fact that the patient is much better. It's the fact that they're looking at a number on a piece of paper, specifically a suppressed TSH, and a TSH tells you nothing about what's going on at the cellular level. It truly is just a number. And so that's what happens. So that's why there's a little bit of reluctance for a lot of practitioners now to really aggressively treat thyroid, because a lot of practitioners have gotten in a lot of trouble with their medical boards in using thyroid.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And staying with thyroid, the question, how does reverse T3 affect free T3? For example, if I have an optimized free T3 level, why does the reverse T3 create a problem, and how would that be treated? Someone asked.
Well, this requires just a bit of background. If the most common thyroid hormone that's released from the thyroid gland is T4, and it's close to 90%. T3 is less than 9%, and reverse T3 is about 1%. If you think about the majority of reverse T3 in the blood, it's enzymatically produced by acting on T4 outside of the thyroid gland. So keep in mind that T4 acts like a prohormone. Its biological or activity it has to be converted into the active form of T3 to exert biological effects. So in some cases, reverse T3 is produced in higher quantities during this process, but reverse T3 is produced in small amounts normally. So basically, this renders the levels of T3 leading to symptoms of hyperthyroidism, although the T4 levels and TSH levels remain within the normal guidelines. And then if you supplement with T3, this bypasses the enzyme system, and then there's not a real issue anymore. I tried to find literature on the clearance rates of reverse T3, and from everything I read, there wasn't an issue with clearance, just that some people with enzymatic conditions have a substantial problem with reverse T3 being produced. So the takeaway point here is, if you supplement with T3, reverse T3 cannot occur from the form you just ingested. It has to come from T4 to make reverse T3. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And what do you do with that in daily practice, Keith?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't measure reverse T3. I don't, because I do exactly what Scott just explained. Sure, if we have an increased reverse T3, let's say we do. So T4 is not entering the cell, or T4 is not being converted to T3. Instead, it's being converted to reverse T3. Okay, bottom line though, how do you treat that? Even if you get a person back with a normal T4, a high reverse T3, normal T3, what do you do? I mean, patients come to you to feel better, but what is the treatment for somebody that has a high reverse T3? Well, number one, you need to probably address the condition that may be causing it. So low energy states, stress, chronic dieting, yo-yo dieting, there's many medical disorders that will cause a decreased T4 entering to the cell, because it requires energy to enter the cell, much more than even requires T3. But bottom line is this: how do you treat that patient? You do exactly what Scott says. You give them T3. Actually, give them a combination of T4, T3, because if you give just T3, Cytomel for some, it will shut down your thyroid's production of T4 in and of itself. And if you're already not converting T4, then you're just going to feel worse. Same way when people just take T4 that have a high reverse T3 and the T4 is not entering the cell, they're not going to feel better on just T4 alone. Those are those type patients that don't feel good on just levothyroxine. So a combination of T4, T3, but bottom line, raising the free T3 level, as Scott just said, is how you address the problem. That's exactly how you address the problem. You raise the free T3. That's the active component at the cellular level. That is what you're saying, Scott, right? I mean,
yes. Well,
you've got to get more T3.
Well, reverse T3, the main point is it's biologically inactive. So it has no real use. It doesn't do anything except take up space and have to be cleared by the body. So what Keith said is exactly what should be done.
Yeah, that's why we use a combination, though. We use a combination therapy because I see Joaquin's pointing on YouTube, but no, we don't want to reduce T4, Joaquin. We give T4 and T3 because if we just give T3, the thyroid gland will shut down its production of T4 and T3. Now you have no T4. So, you've just got T3 on board. After you run out of that, about an 8-hour half-life or so, I mean, you're going to crash. If you just give T4, while some people don't feel well, because some people don't convert, it shuts down your thyroid's production of T4 and T3. So there goes your 9% or 9 to 20%, whatever data you're looking at, where the thyroid produces T3. So if you give just T4, it shuts down your thyroid's production of T4 and T3. And then if you don't convert, you're going to get very symptomatic. So now that's why we give a combination of T4 and T3. That's why a lot of people feel better utilizing a combination like Armour Thyroid, MP Thyroid, West Thyroid, you name it, because we have the T3 that's on board to take care of those symptoms. And then by the time that we've reached that half-life of the T3, we have the T4 to be converted. So we don't want to reduce T4, Joaquin. We want to increase free T3.
Great.
Okay. And how high do you want to go with your T3, your free T3 actually? Because I know that's a difficult question as always, but is that also just symptom resolution? Or
The answer to that is symptom resolution. You treat towards symptom resolution. And I've talked on previous podcasts about the history and utilization of thyroid, and been using it for a decade. I mean, a century. And we used to treat with desiccated thyroid from the very beginning, and we would treat just based on symptoms. It wasn't until the 70s where they developed the TSH test that we started treating off of a number. So we treat just like we used to treat. Optimal doesn't equal normal. Endocrinologists, family physician, internists, they treat toward a normal value. The problem is normal is not optimal. So what is your optimal? I don't know. I'll give you a trial of Armour Thyroid, and we will manage your symptoms until they improve. If you get side effects, nervousness, increased sweating, palpitations, then you just back off the dose. For most, if they have to increase the dose to a significant degree, I like to break up the dose into 2 daily doses, a morning dose and an afternoon dose, especially if we're getting that, afternoon fatigue. So that's kind of how we treat, but it's once again just like testosterone based on symptoms.
Okay, and is there any point following that up with levels of TSH, because they will be suppressed or lower than normal range anyway?
They will be suppressed, absolutely. We order thyroid function tests because it comes as a panel, but really we're really looking at that free T3, and so the lower limit of normal for most of those thyroid tests, the TSH is around 0.45 or so. A lot of our people are 0.1, 0.2, 0.01, but they feel great because they're free T3. It may be above the normal range for the average of a population of sick people. So the free T3 may be 4 or 5 or 6. It just depends on that individual. So, but their TSH is typically then suppressed, but there's never been any harm shown in suppressing a TSH. If you had thyroid cancer, had your thyroid removed, they give you thyroid and they suppress your TSH all the way down to 0, but yet it causes no harm. So it's okay if you got thyroid cancer to suppress your TSH and live a good life. But if you're a normal person that is miserable and having symptoms of hypothyroidism, it's not okay to suppress your TSH.
Now, are the doses equivalent from like a Cytomel or the desiccated form?
Well,
or if you use Synthroid, like a combined, are the doses equivalent from forms to forms?
Synthroid and MP thyroid, yes, they're equivalent. It's 38 micrograms of T4 and 9 of T3. But it's the only difference between, for instance, Armour thyroid and MP thyroid is just the inactive ingredients, not the actual active ingredients. But Cytomel is pure T3. You can compound your own thyroid, desiccated thyroid even, into any specific combination that you want. You can also compound it in with just, synthetic T4 and Cytomel. Some people, like Waqid's very open about the fact that he's, Waqid is due to religious purposes and needs compounded. And so you compound it.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Okay, we learned a lot on the thyroid. So let's move on to something else. Another question, does the DHEA convert to estrogen? And if not, why do some men complain of side effects when starting DHEA that are similar to high estrogen? The asker asks, I personally tried DHEA twice, and both times I felt extremely fatigued, had water gain in the face, ankles, and libido was trashed. Within 72 hours of stopping DHEA, 25 grams, the symptoms dissipated. It says, not sure if this is estrogen or the chemical fillers in our DHEA pills might cause allergic reactions. So what is your reaction on that, Scott?
Well, DHEA is converted. It is reduced to androstenedione, which is aromatized into estrone, E1, and then estrone can be reversibly converted to 17-beta estradiol, E2. E1 and E2 are both biosynthesized by aromatization by androstenedione and then testosterone. It's indirect. There's a pathway in between. So direct conversion, no, it has to go through a pathway. But eventually downstream, there's some conversion.
Yeah, if you look at the studies on DHEA, there's minimal conversion to those metabolites like testosterone and DHT in a man versus a woman. The woman, you'll get an increase in some of those androgens, but in a man, it's a minimal increase.
So the process is there. It's just
minimal. It's negligible. It's a minimal effect on a man as far as DHEA being converted, for instance, to testosterone, which is then converted to DHT or estradiol. But like Scott, there's another pathway via estrone, but it's still minimal. So I can't tell you that I've read any reported incidents of that occurring in the medical literature. I can tell you that I wish Eric was here because DHEA is his baby. I've got about 25, 30, 40 articles that Eric's and I sent back and forth, I don't know, about 8 months ago or so, but I can read from one of them. This is funny. It's that it says that no subjects exposed to DHEA have, and they're talking about millions of people, there's never been a serious side effect noted and has never been reported in the world literature. The only adverse effects that really ever noted is hirsutism, hair growth, or acne. Other than that, it's got a tremendously great safety profile.
And that was a meta-analysis, right?
Yeah.
Systematic review meta-analysis.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, that should be reassuring, I guess.
I've never heard.
If it happens, but hey, if it happens to you, I guess it happens to you. I guess that's where you have to use the coin the term that everybody wants to use when something happens that's unexpected that you can't explain is we're all biochemically unique.
No, you didn't. I knew you were going to say that.
I never use that term. And so bottom line is this, I would start with a lower dose. I personally can't take DHEA very much because I get acne. Dr. Rouzier can't take DHEA. He gets acne. I don't care how low the dose, extremely sensitive to it, I'll get acne. But that brings us to another topic. Whenever I was on DHEA, my DHEA went up to 800. But before I started it, it was in the 200s, just like it is for most of us old guys, or lower. But talking about the backfilling of the pathways, I thought it was great that Anthony Labris put on a good article about those backfilling the pathways. That even though I'm not on DHEA, but I am on pregnenolone, of course. I do take my testosterone, I do take my melatonin, those. But my DHEA, not being on DHEA and just being on testosterone, is 500. But yet before I ever started testosterone, it was 200. When I took DHEA, it was 800. So you don't really become depleted in those pathways. In fact, I guess my pregnenolone is doing the trick there. But nonetheless, I'm certainly not deficient by being on TRT.
Okay. So another question: what type of oil in cypionate is well accepted by most men's bodies without side effects? And is that grapeseed oil? I have no idea.
That's Scott's territory right there.
Wow. Well, I enjoyed looking at this question earlier. There's basically 3 intramuscular preparations that are approved by the FDA in the U.S. These are testosterone cypionate, enanthate, and undecanoate. The cypionate is branded as depot-testosterone by Pfizer or Upjohn, and there are generics available in 100 milligrams per milliliter or 200 milligrams per milliliter concentrations. And this base is a cottonseed oil. There's also a benzyl benzoate. It's used as a solvent to dissolve the esterized testosterone into the cottonseed base to make a prepared solution. The benzyl alcohol is added to it as a preservative. In contrast, testosterone enanthate, which is marketed as deletestrol, is available in 200 milligrams per milliliter in a sesame seed oil base. And the interesting thing about this is that they use chlorobutanol as a preservative. So it's different than the cypionate that's marketed. And of course, the undecanoate is supplied in 250 milligram concentrations in 3 milliliter vials with a castor oil base and benzyl benzoate. So the differences here is that the cypionate and enanthate, the structural differences are just that one has an extra carbon on the ester. The enanthate has a 7 carbon and the cypionate has an 8 carbon, but both have the identical testosterone molecule. An interesting point about this is that sesame seed oil was used as the original base in 1936, right after the original testosterone synthesis by Butenandt and Rouzier in 1935. So to fully answer the question here, the impetus to switch oil bases to grapeseed oil came from illicit androgen use. And after doing a search here to prepare for this podcast, I noted some very popular compounding pharmacies that have provided this grapeseed oil base. And once again, the impetus to do that was from illicit androgen use, where people are actually making their own products and using them. So as far as the actual side effects with commercial preparations of testosterone, I have never had a side effect that people complain about. However, if there is a side effect and it's come from a different testosterone source, then it's usually related to the amount of benzyl alcohol that's put into it as a preservative, not the actual base of the oil. So trying to think anything else I could add there.
I think you hit the sweet spot there.
Yeah, have you guys ever had any injection site reactions like you see questions about?
No.
I've never experienced it, and with any pharmaceutical grade testosterone, I never have.
Not with the cypionate, because I deal with predominantly just the cypionate. I've not had any problems with cypionate. I know Steven's had problem with the mixtures there, but not cypionate.
What was it?
The mixture was Sustanon. That's 4 different type of esters, propionate and so on. And I had these bad, painful nodules that were painful for 4 to 5 days, and they lasted. I injected it subcutaneously, and those nodules appeared on 7 of the 10 injections, and they stayed for weeks. So really, all discoloration, really bad. And I've seen that in several patients as well.
The short-term esters in that preparation on Sustanon, when you inject that depot into the muscle, when somebody injects a blend like Omnidrin or Sustanon 250 intramuscularly, those short-acting esters tend to crystallize in the depot outside of the how the depot forms, and that causes an inflammation response around the depot. So that is a notable side effect from Sustanon 250. Almost every user that, and that's one of the only commercially available brands of testosterone except for like a testosterone suspension that causes pain. But a testosterone suspension is water-based. But there's a reason, because those the esters metabolize at the sides of the depot, and it crystallizes and causes an inflammation response.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's clear now. Another question was, I see men who decide to become fertile and their docs take them off cypionate and add HCG to their protocol. Isn't this an unseated change, since all a man needs to add is HCG to the cypionate protocol? Any idea why docs continue performing this practice, or is it simply out of ignorance? Keith, you probably have experience with that in daily practice.
There's different protocols out there. There's no standard protocol there, but yes, you don't necessarily have to come off your testosterone. That's an option, though. That's absolutely an option, is to come off and take HCG, and but there are other options as well to remain on your testosterone and utilize HCG or HMG in certain dosages, certain amounts per week to try to induce spermatogenesis while using testosterone.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
One point I can add is it depends on the type of hypogonadism that's actually there. If you have primary, there's nothing that you're going to do to get that. So and then secondary can be of different forms. So preparing for this, I looked over some different protocols, and one of the key findings that I found in the second protocol, let me pull this up so I can explain this. So it's an HCG therapy intramuscularly, 2,000 units 3 times per week. The serum testosterone level is checked every month to make sure that the range of T is between 4 and 900. And then there's a semen analysis, and then monitoring over 3 to 6 months, and then the addition of FSH and by substitute HMG. Well, one of the issues with all of these that I saw was that this range of the testosterone level. Do you think that has any importance, Keith? Because it seems to me this is pretty common in what they say. So as long as the testosterone remained in a certain range, is there any implication for holding the level in that range?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, I always tell my patients, bodybuilders get women pregnant.
Yeah.
So, but there are various protocols out there. It's just, but the problem with starting testosterone is there's always the risk of infertility. I mean, that's the one thing you have to address, and you have to hit that home. No guarantees in medicine, but but there are various protocols that you can go over with a patient. You can sit down and talk about, we have this option A, option B, option Z. As Scott said, when you did your research, you saw there's just There's no standardized protocol. There's various protocols. And so you go with one that you have found to be successful and see if that'll work for them. But that's the problem with testosterone replacement therapy. That is one of the real problems, is that when you're ready to conceive, you can run into some issues.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And next question. What is the best way to optimize growth hormone levels? That's a very general question, but of course, I guess the answer is injecting growth hormone.
That would be my answer. There's my answer right there, growth hormone.
Exactly.
That's too expensive to have a daily thing to do so. But how can people go about that if they want to optimize growth hormone? Have any experience with the SARMs or the, what is it, MK677, Keith or Scott?
Are you talking about SARMs, or are you talking about growth hormone secretagogues?
Yes, these are growth hormone secretagogues, yes.
There's tons of peptides and various things out there. The issue is that many have not been, well, almost all of them that are currently marketed on peptide sites have not been approved by the FDA for any reason. And so you run into this gray area of, and even some compounding pharmacies have picked up on some that I didn't ever think would be picked up on. So I see a big gray area where there's a sort of a legal shadow over the whole thing. But, in an ideal situation, you could use injectable growth hormone and completely replace it. But as you said, it's expensive. It's the synthesis for growth hormone is very efficient. I mean, it's the same with the coli. It's generated with the coli, the same as it is with certain forms of insulin. And it's just a financial hurdle for most people. And one thing, many doctors won't prescribe it because with the indications that are for use right now, they're highly restricted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the same thing here. Yeah,
I know people don't tend to believe that, but I had a conversation with Rick Collins, who, one of the lead attorneys in the United States, and he said you'd have to be somewhat, we use a polite term, you need to really be careful and probably shouldn't be doing it because of what Scott just outlined there as far as prescribing peptides for patients as a physician, because they are not FDA approved. And when a person has a problem and you've started them on a non-FDA approved substance like a peptide, he says he has no defense for you. There's just no defense. I mean, if you give a prescription, for instance, tesamorelin that is FDA approved, if they're not HIV positive with, lipodystrophy secondary to their antiretroviral therapy drugs, then and they have a problem, you have no out. Dr. Rouzier has told us, and
I understand. Okay,
just not to believe it, but there's plenty of lawsuits out there on peptides right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll stay away from the growth hormone optimization for the moment.
Let's see if there's any questions here.
I had one more. As I told you this week, we mailed about that, Keith and Scott, about my local Belgian compounding pharmacist. He just informed me that he will no longer be able to compound it for me, since he was informed, the 20% testosterone cream, since he was informed that it is illegal to do so in concentrations higher than 2.5%. Since, and there I quote the legal Dutch text from our government, it has not been scientifically proven or documented in international publications that higher than 2.5% concentrations are effective or safe. So that's the end of our Belgian 20% testosterone cream then. And even the pharmacist said to me in his email, well, there's always the option of ordering abroad. So here in Belgium, we can order in the UK with Balance My Hormones, or the compounding pharmacy with Nichols that I had an interview with a few weeks ago. He's in Greece, and they can just, when they have a prescription, compound it and send it to you. And that is completely legal. So What is your opinion on that, Scott? What do you think about that?
Well, it sort of misses the whole point of compounding a medication if there's restrictions on what the dose are as far as that. But at the same time, the studies that I sent you when I received your email, I sent you at least 10 trials, and most of them were conducted with a dose response. And what I mean by dose response is that the doses were graded upwards to a very high level, up to 600 milligrams of testosterone enanthate. In these studies, if you want to gauge the harmful effects of dose, these are the doses or the studies to do so. And in all these studies, the only effect that occurred was secondary erythrocytosis, leading to greater hematocrit measurements in each of the studies. And as Keith and I previously discussed on the forums and on podcasts, that this is not an issue. It's only an issue if you have a familial disorder, and the evidence of major major health outcomes in literature is just not there. There's just no evidence of it. And so what we have is years and years. I was just talking to Keith before the podcast. We have 80 years of evidence at our disposal, and we have still been dealing with this problem that started in 1938 when the first journal published a warning about androgen therapy. And we're still fighting this today, although there's such an enormous body of evidence that to come to that conclusion and restrict the compounding is just not based in reason. It's not based in the science. And if it's based in what Morgan Taylor calls it, medical hysteria.
I understand. Keith, you wanted to anything to add to that?
I mean, there's a big push to limit compounding here in the U.S. too. Once again, does Big Pharma have anything to do with what you're doing over there? Is the 2.5 available compounded, or is it a prescription only?
No, it's there's the androgel, the Testosterone. It's 1.62%, and I guess the Testosterone is a bit more. I guess 2.5% or something like that. But yeah,
right,
legally you can't go over that. Yeah, even if compounded.
So once again, pharmaceutical companies get involved, and of course, and to exert a response, you just have to give a lot more. I mean, a lot more. You're talking about 25 milligrams per gram versus 200 milligrams per gram. So it's that's a terrible state of affairs.
Hey, one question I want to address on the forum. Eddie, he states, does Dr. Nichols know of studies that talk about higher doses of T? My doc says that most of the transdermal T studies, they showed benefit when normal levels less than 900, and goes on to say, my doc gets worried when I go over 1200, and he says there aren't many studies at those levels. Eddie, the study that I just described that I sent to Stephen were dose response studies, and those levels went way above the 1200 that you're talking about. And they were assessed by randomized, clinically not placebo, they controlled trials and graded doses. So there is evidence out there, and it doesn't matter if the mode of administration is a cream on the scrotum, or if it's intermuscular, if it's subcutaneous. We're talking about when we're actually comparing dose, it doesn't matter about the mode of administration. The only risk, like I said before, is secondary erythrocytosis. Now, that's not to say that some people might have some odd outcome that happens, and most of the time it gets associated with the therapy that they're taking. What that is saying is, for most normal, healthy men, graded doses, even extremely high doses, are not that high, are not harmful to the cardiovascular system or with a secondary erythrocytosis to increase the hematocrit and red blood cell count. So it has to be taken in proportion, but there are studies. But as far as specific studies for transdermal, I really, they would be great if there were some, but I don't really see that there's a need when doses have went that high. Because you got to think, in the highest achieved category in one of those trials at 600, what do you think that their normal or their free testosterone levels and total testosterone levels would be, Keith? Do you have any idea what you would think their levels would be at 600?
The free testosterone?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 10.
Okay. Well, somebody taking that dose consistently is going to have those levels in their body more consistently than someone applying a lower dose by the scrotum. So do you see where my reasoning is going? Someone has levels that high and it's consistently, it doesn't matter about the scrotal. Does that make sense? Or is that confusing?
I understand. Yeah, that makes sense completely. So we had a super chat tip from Eddie V to thank us probably for the question, because he didn't put any new question next to that, but that was a very interesting answer, Scott. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing with Eddie, and your doctor once again is caught up on a number. This is the whole, Dr. Rouzier talked about it yesterday with the female podcast. Everyone's caught up in a number. Your physician, his physician's caught up in a number. We treat symptoms, we treat towards optimal. And so the numbers follow. I wish we didn't even have to obtain laboratory studies, but we do. But if your doctor wanted a level less than 1200, just measure it at a different time. They don't tell you when to measure it, what time to measure it. After you give it, they don't tell you when to measure it. But you can be super high if you want to measure it the day after your injection. You can be at your, lowest amount days after your injection. But nonetheless, when we talk about your doctor says 1200, that's why I see men in my office, because their doctor went to 900. They didn't feel any better. Their free testosterone really is not significantly elevated enough for them to have a response to the testosterone. And the only way I know to improve their symptoms is to raise that free testosterone level. So, but this is the problem that we run into on a daily basis that Eddie brings out, is that doctors treat toward a number, and if you're not better, well, that's, there's danger after that, which I don't know of any studies that show any danger after that. And I provided a study last week, with Dr. J, that showed men that they treated for a period of time, they got into the 1600 range and over the 3000 range, and there was no major adverse cardiac events in any of those, even in the men that had levels over 3000. So, the only thing that they really noticed was an erythrocytosis, as Scott reported, and some edema. Those were the major adverse effects of even being at over 3000. Now, I don't have anybody over 3000. I'm just saying in that study, but if you look at what happened to the men that were at 1600, they had a much more significant decrease in visceral body fat, increase in lean muscle mass, so, if you're treating towards symptoms, you're not treating a number.
Well, the takeaway point with that is that the evidence is there, and requesting it just to be a different mode of administration is almost ridiculous, because the evidence is right there. The dose levels are there. The studies are there. It's in the literature. So I'll try to post some of these studies in the forum.
Yeah, and so I see why Keith's pointing out that, yes, these normal values are the average of a population of sick people. They don't take the healthiest, youngest people. They don't, evaluate them for symptoms of, let's just say, hypothyroidism, when they're taking the thyroid, looking for thyroid values to establish a normal value. Even if you look at the normal testosterone values that they just came out with, they took, basically it came from 400 men. There were 4,000 in these 4 studies being done in the US and Europe, but it really came from 400 men, but they weren't evaluated for symptoms of hypogonadism. They were excluded for other reasons. They had prostate cancer and things like that, but they didn't get the healthiest 25-year-olds and that are just at the peak of their physical condition, completely asymptomatic, and get those normal values. If they did, we'd have a completely different set of normative values.
Mm-hmm. I had some more questions filtered out by Wakit from the chat box. One was regarding the 200 milliliter per gram testosterone cream. Do you have any patients that are achieving great results and alleviation of their symptoms with only a low dose? For example, one single click per day, once per day even.
Oh, this yesterday, Friday, I can't tell you. I wish the guys were listening to this now and would report, because you can't tell them their names, but I'm going to tell you. Everybody that I called, I mean, you would be surprised. You have to start with a dose, and then you adjust that dose up and down based on symptoms. Yes, you look at levels. I do tell men if their free testosterone comes back really elevated, I mean, they're not getting any more benefit than being in a more appropriate range. I'm trying to be very careful with my words here, but the cream, yes, there are many men that are on one click twice a day that have a free testosterone value that is beautiful. Their total's beautiful. They're asymptomatic. So the average dose, typically the average dose is 2 clicks twice a day. That tends to be the average, okay? Friday, every man that was on that had to come down to 2 clicks in the morning and 1 click in the evening. I mean, because they needed to lower their dosage. They were they were, they're great in their symptoms, but they're kind of wasting a product. You want to save money too. I mean, let's make up a number. A free testosterone of 75 is not going to get you any more benefit than a free testosterone of let's just say 50. So yes, we can come down and follow their symptoms still, and that way they're not spending as much money. It's just working great in them. These tend to be the younger men. When I say younger, since I'm so old now, I'm talking about young 40s and mid 30s. But they have a lot of receptors. They're very sensitive, and so they do well. And some would definitely 1 click twice a day. But the average dose, 2 clicks twice a day. Some, like us old guys, may need 3 clicks twice a day. I don't think I have anybody that I know of in years that's over 3 clicks twice a day. Most are 2 clicks twice a day, or a variation of 2, 3 and 2, 2 and 2, 1 and 2. But yes, the cream can work wonders and miracles. It's just all going to depend on several factors, And
picking up on what you just said, Keith, could one get a kind of symptoms if the free testosterone goes up even further and further? If one would now really exaggerate, money is no issue, so 5 clicks twice a day, would one get any symptoms of high testosterone?
No. Well, I mean, see, now then we start crossing the line, and I have to explain to my patients between medical TRT and testosterone abuse. And I'm not going to cross that line. I mean, there just comes a point to where, we're not going to get any additional benefits. Now, when you put it in, I guess, Scott, you're very familiar with the anabolic steroid world, and I see the autopsies of these bodybuilders that die, and their testosterone levels were in the tens of thousands. But you're not going to get a benefit, I don't think, any more significant benefit. When I look at the paper that I'm referring to just last week, when they looked at the men that their testosterone levels were 3,300 and compared them to men that were 1,600, there was not a significant difference at all with the degree of improvement as far as, decrease in visceral body fat, increase in lean muscle in those ranges.
Well, one thing that I can add is that in conditions of abuse, there are almost always side effects that occur. And what I'm talking about is the known side effects. And then what Keith said at the lower end of the spectrum is completely reversed at the higher end of the spectrum. And what I mean by that is it follows the same logic, but as you continually keep abusing and consuming more androgens and by whatever mode of administration, after you reach a certain point, there are more side effects than what you're actually getting for performance enhancement and benefit. Nitrogen retention in the muscles is maxed out. You can't recycle any more proteins within the body. You've reached a physiological threshold. So going past it doesn't make common sense. It doesn't make practical sense at all.
I'm so happy you said that, Scott, because I refer to it as a point of diminishing returns.
Yeah,
And
that's exactly
it's a point of diminishing returns. And so I want this to make sure that this, whatever you do, tweet Dr. Nichols said this, send it to anyone. I want to use the lowest dose of testosterone that will resolve your symptoms.
That's optimal.
That I want to use the lowest dose that will resolve your symptoms.
That's clear.
That's the essence of optimization.
That is medical TRT.
Yeah. And that is great. Great answer. Okay, I had some more questions. Is prolactin misunderstood like E2 as well? Or is there a sweet spot for prolactin? We
only measure prolactin initially to rule out if they have a very low testosterone level to begin with. You know, if a man comes in with an extremely low testosterone level, you talk about 150, 100. I mean, you need to exclude a prolactin secreting pituitary adenoma. So we will run a prolactin level. So now as a baseline study, we run a prolactin level. And, I've only had 2 come back that were elevated that did have pituitary adenomas. Otherwise, we only measure it the first time. So I'm not looking for any sweet spot for prolactin. Typically, if we do ever recheck it, it stays within a normal range, even after they start testosterone. So, Scott, do you have any experience with prolactin?
No, the only real knowledge I have about it is narrowing a differential down, like you were talking about. You exclude a possibility, ignore it, and move on.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. And following that up with the question of Thomas, my last blood work, my prolactin is up 412. My SHBG is 12 and my E2 is a little high, but I feel good. Is there anything or something to worry about?
Well, 412, are we talking, are we talking European measurements, American measurements? Because that would be really high for the measurements that we use. So we would be getting a MRI of his brain, but I don't know what measurement units he's using versus what we would use. So, we can look up, LabCorp Quest normative ranges, but 412 would definitely be out of those ranges for the labs we use here in the US.
In the chat box, Thomas is already on it, and he says, my prolactin raised after I started TRT. And I asked what units, and he answers euro.
Yeah, so I don't have any experience on your euro levels. We'd have to convert that to the American units. I think when I saw his, I think I did try to convert that. I think he posted that maybe on your Facebook page, and it wasn't too elevated. It was mildly, if anything. So but I wouldn't have worried about it. But if you are, the only thing you're worrying about is a pituitary adenoma. So, you can always MRI your brain.
Mm-hmm. Thomas says the normal range there on the lab is 100 to 320, and his is 412.
Yeah, I would give my patient the option of having an MRI of the brain to rule out a pituitary adenoma. So that's what we would do.
Because that's not the usual circumstance with replacement therapy.
Correct.
It doesn't ever get that high.
But the fact that you're taking testosterone would override the fact that if you did have a prolactin secreting tumor, it would be lowering your testosterone. But since you're taking exogenous testosterone, you're going to hide that effect. So, if your prolactin was elevated and you weren't on testosterone and you came in and your levels were 100 or 150, I'd be concerned. So I'd order an MRI of your brain.
Okay, Thomas, thanks for your super chat tip, and I hope that answers your question. So maybe you should consider getting that MRI. Talk to your doctor about it. Another guy said in the chat box, my doc gets worried when I go over 1200. Yeah, he's looking at the numbers, of course. And he says there aren't many studies at those levels on transscrotal. Is that right, Scott?
That's the one I addressed earlier.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I addressed that with the dose response. I addressed that guy. What is it, Eddie?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
That's it.
addressed his question.
Okay. I saw you already addressed the 15 milligrams mirtazapine question as well. There's no interaction, you said, with TRT.
There's not an interaction that I know of.
Yeah.
I don't know of one.
Okay, that's what you said. And one last question here. I believe I heard you say, Dr. Keith, that you start everyone on TRT and DHEA, or is it better to optimize TRT first and then DHEA, as the two can have overlapping side effects?
Well, as we talked about DHEA before, the only side effect will be acne or hirsutism. So I don't know of any other effects in millions of men, and I'm reading from a meta-analysis here. I mean, it's proven to be extremely safe. So it's an over-the-counter supplement. The last question you asked Dr. Rouzier yesterday was that exact question, and that's what he teaches. We optimize all the hormones, each individual hormone, from melatonin to pregnenolone to DHEA to vitamin D3, testosterone, thyroid, has their individual protective effects. If you want to look at preventative medicine and look at all those protective effects that they provide you, then you want to optimize those levels. So as we age, those levels go down. So optimization is raising those levels to the levels of a young, healthy person. So, I mean, and I always put this on the Facebook, so I'll read from this paper. So it's not Dr. Nichols said, but this is the meta-analysis. So DHEA demonstrates, so let's just say this, you're on testosterone. So why would I want to take DHEA then? I feel pretty good on testosterone. I will tell you that DHEA is not a feel-good hormone. I mean, some people may notice a difference when they take it, so they say, but there are two feel-good hormones. It is thyroid and it is testosterone. If you're deficient in those, you feel it, you know it. I mean, you're a miserable human being. So I optimize all the hormones. So why would I want to supplement for DHEA? Why would I want to take somebody that comes in with a low normal and bring them up to an optimal level? Well, let's see. DHEA demonstrates neuroprotective and neuroexcitatory as well as antidepressant and memory enhancing properties in humans. DHEA modulates endothelial function, reduces inflammation, improves insulin sensitivity, blood flow, cellular immunity, body composition, bone metabolism, sexual function, and physical strength and frailty, as well as providing neuroprotection, improved cognitive function, and memory enhancement. And it goes on and on. If you don't want those, don't take it. I want all those. So I want to optimize everything I just read out, man. Give me more, give me some. I want some of that. So that's the point, is that if you look at all the individual hormones like Dr. Rouzier teaches, you know, we spend hours and hours and hours on each individual hormone. And by the time you're finished, you're thinking, man, I want that hormone. I want that hormone at an optimal level. So yes, I believe in optimizing all of our hormones. I don't believe putting all the eggs in the TRT basket only. Yes, it has wonderful protective qualities, but so does DHEA, so does melatonin, so does pregnenolone. So, you know, Scott, you're feeling?
I agree 100%. If it has benefit and it's out of balance, then I think it should be a remedy. But like we said before, there's a difference between someone that is intending to abuse or go nuts. But if you're trying to extend your life and be a healthy male, you need to optimize all the hormones, because a lot of the symptoms are interrelated. The thyroid's interrelated a lot with the testosterone and other hormones. So I just think it's the logical thing for a modern male to address this at the point in their life where those hormones start to decline. And even if earlier, if they're out of balance in the beginning. So optimization is a logical, it's a logical thing to do to preserve your health.
Yes, I mean, you want to maintain all your hormones at an optimal level, just not testosterone. I'll ask all these men, why are you taking testosterone? Well, I want all these beneficial qualities. Well, all these other ones provide these other beneficial qualities as well. Don't you want the same from them? And of course, you're going to get an answer. Well, yeah, I do. Just like any of us would when you know. And so we try to teach this. You know, I'm looking right here at other male. I had my thyroid tested, and my labs were normal. I don't know what's wrong with me. Other male, join the crowd. You test pretty much everybody's thyroid and it's in the normal range, despite having significant symptoms of hypothyroidism, especially in women. That's where you optimize thyroid. You're always going to get told it's normal. How many men that are on this forum, that are on this YouTube channel, how many men really went into their doctor and got diagnosed with hypogonadism? Really had, less than 250 or 300 on 2 early morning tests? Very few, very few. It's very hard to get a diagnosis of hypogonadism by the Endocrine Society's guidelines now. You have to have signs and symptoms, have to be tested twice, fasting in the morning, and very few meet this stringent, strict criteria anymore. But yet we still supplement because we use it off-label for the symptoms. Thyroid, same way. So other male, I would, you're looking at optimizing your thyroid, really looking at your free T3 levels, trying to get them in an optimal range. I can't tell you what that number is. It's going to be different for everybody. But, it's following symptoms and signs.
Okay, maybe one more question before we end this. Any studies related to CBD or medical marijuana interacting with TRT? Scott, you have any studies on that?
Actually, I think I might have 1 or 2 studies in that area, but it's not a topic of interest to me, so I haven't dove into it. But I can't remember if it was animal studies, if it was rat models that were used, but I believe I do have 1 or 2. I know at least 1 because I remember the topic. If so, I'll post it in the forum. I'll just have to search my database and pull it.
Eric sent me a book on CBD oil to check on that, but I think Dr. J's big into the, estrogeneration. You read on that. I believe that, of course, marijuana being very estrogenic. So
a big no-no.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's end the questions here. We've been over an hour and 10. So maybe before we wrap this up, anything you wanted to add, Keith, in our bro science section, as we did a few times before? Anything you heard or read online the last few weeks or the last weeks that was funny, or do you want to debunk?
With my hand, I've been a little too busy to be really looking at the bro science lately. I wish I'm kind of glad I hadn't had time to look at the bro science, but because you've got such a good group going on Facebook. There's no actual need to go to any more bro science forums. I mean, I don't need to go there anymore to see what people are saying, because you can stay busy enough just looking at the guys that really want to learn. I am concerned about other male. If he had actually testosterone level of 11 nanograms per deciliter, that's not good. I'm looking at your reports here. If that's true, that's not good. I've never seen a testosterone that low. Are you looking at what I'm looking at?
I just did.
Is that testosterone, other male? Other male being OTHERMAIL, not MALE. So other male, is that an actual testosterone level? The only way you can have a level that low is, you can have, primary hypogonadism. Yeah, you got castrated, or bottom line is you have a prolactin secreting tumor.
Is that right?
Or you've been on testosterone and you just haven't taken it. The number one reason, quite frankly, that men come in with low testosterone levels, believe it or not, around the country is previous testosterone use, or they're on testosterone already.
That makes a ton of sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that's really low. There's something else there.
Yep.
Okay, anything you read or heard last week that was really bro science or plain out stupid, Scott?
Well, I'm going to have to play simple here. What Keith said is right on point, because I've looked, sometimes I don't like to post because you get in these debates and it just takes so much time out of your day. But here lately, the posts have been really focused. I mean, it's been really good questions, and there's no crazy ideas that are floating around. Nothing like some of the other previous forums. So I'd have to say that the group that is on there is getting their stuff together.
I was scrolling it real quick either yesterday or this afternoon on our forum on your Facebook page, and I think somebody posted. After I read the first sentence, I had to just kind of defer and just move on. I just had to close my iPad, but it was, I think I've crashed my estrogen. Goodness. I mean,
Awesome.
come on now. We, if you're on Steven's Facebook page, you watching these podcasts, you know better than to even attempt to crash your estrogen. So please don't. If you were to Google, I've crashed my estrogen, do you know how many pages show up?
Yeah.
Wow. Just eat soybeans.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So let's wrap this one up here. So thank you so much, Scott, for being here. The same for Yuki. Thank you so much for your time. Maybe you can tell people that are interested, because I still see people in the chat box not knowing the name of our group, and maybe they want to contact you as well. So Scott, how can people reach out to you if they want to ask questions or anything, what you're doing as daily stuff?
If someone wants to reach me, they can email me at showell@tier1hw.com. I don't have a lot of time to give elaborate explanations, but if you got some issue you want to chat with, shoot me a message and I'll see what I can do. But soon
Okay.
I'll be going down to Tier 1, and we'll be getting together the research division.
Yep. And I hope Scott will be available to consult with men and do what he does best, So I hope he'll have a good chance to, he has a tremendous amount of knowledge, which we're all finding out, a tremendous amount of knowledge of the literature. I mean, a tremendous amount. But for us, it's if you want to contact Tier 1, it's wellness@tier1hw.com. And
Okay.
just speak with Emily and she'll get you any information that you want.
Okay, well, that's your answer, Othermail, because he already asked what's your email. So I guess he is reaching out to you, Keith. Okay, so thank you so much for joining. Still 36 people watching for the moment, so that's quite a lot. And I guess a lot of others will be watching this the next few days. So thanks again for your time, guys. And I'll end this show here. Stop the